Dum, 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 dum. It was great. All right, it is time. This is an SAT grammar crash course where I cover all of the SAT concepts in just 30 minutes. To get all right, all the SAT grammar in 30 minutes. I'm going to cover everything: periods, commas, semicolons, modifiers, apostrophes, pronouns, verbs, and more, including legit SAT examples to prove that my tactics work. Yeah. Kill comma splices and 3 rules. Rule 1, you need to know what independent clauses and dependent clauses are. This is incredibly important for the grammar section. All that independent clauses are just complete sentences. They are full sentences that, when read by themselves, make sense. Dependent clauses are not full sentences. They cannot stand on their own and they do not make sense when they are read by themselves. The SAT likes to test what punctuation is used when combining these different types of clauses. Rule 2 will be what combines 2 independent clauses. This means what combines 2 full sentences. As everyone knows, we know a period can combine 2 full sentences, right? But also a semicolon can, and then a comma plus fanboys can as well. So periods and semicolons act the same. Fanboys are conjunctions. They are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So it is an acronym representing these various conjunctions that can separate 2 full sentences, but they must have a comma before them. You cannot separate 2 full sentences with a lone comma. That's a comma splice, and that's no bueno. Rule 3 is what can connect an independent clause with a dependent clause. And so rule 2 was connecting 2 full sentences. Rule 3 is connecting a full sentence with a sentence fragment or dependent clause. Well, it depends on the order. So if a dependent clause comes before the independent clause, you're going to want to use a comma. But if the full sentence or independent clause comes before the dependent clause, you usually don't want to put any punctuation unless it's non-essential information, which is covered in a chapter that's going to be in about 7 minutes. So let's keep going. Let's try out an example just to show you guys. So with the grammar section, for every question type, you always want to look at the answer choices first, and you want to look at what's changing. In this case, I see punctuation changing. We can see that there's a period, a semicolon, a comma, and no punctuation. That means punctuation's changing between the answer choices. If that's the case, it's testing clauses. So you want to look at the clause before the punctuation and after the punctuation. Then you want to determine, well, is it an independent clause or is it a dependent clause? because depending on the combination, that's going to be the punctuation or answer choice that you choose. Let's take a look. So I can see that there's an extra sentence at the beginning of this passage. You more or less can ignore that. All I want to pay attention to is the sentence starting, hoping to help her students and their families outside the blank, because the sentence with the blank is going to be the one where I need to know what punctuation to use. So you pretty much ignore the rest. So in this case, I'm going to read the first clause before the punctuation. And classroom right here is going to belong to the first clause because classroom is before the punctuation. Hoping to help her students and the families outside the classroom. So is that an independent clause or a dependent clause? Or full sentence or fragment? It's a fragment. Hoping to help her students and their families outside the classroom. Who's hoping to help her students? Who is her? I don't know. This sentence doesn't make sense by itself. Therefore, it's a dependent clause. Now let's look at the clause after the punctuation. Huerta left teaching to start the Stockton chapter of the Community Service Organization, a group focused on the needs of local farm workers. That sounds like a pretty complete sentence, right? So now we know it goes dependent clause to an independent clause. I know, no, I can't choose A and I can't choose B because a period and a semicolon only separate two full sentences. So I know it's not those. Now I'm between C and D. Should I use a comma or should I use no punctuation? Well, you got to remember that punctuation just represents pauses when speaking. So if I end a sentence, I pause completely. That's why you use something like a period. Versus a comma is used when I'm pausing kind of mid-sentence. It's a light pause. I call them soft stops. So in this case, read the sentence in your head. Would you pause before starting the second clause? You would. That indicates you want to use a comma, so C would be the correct answer. In addition, since it goes dependent clause than independent clause, I know a comma must be used, so C is the right answer either way. Now, let's move on to mastering colons and 2 rules. Rule 1 for using a colon is that an independent clause or full sentence must come before the colon. Rule 2 is that any clause can come after the colon. It could be a full sentence, it could be a list, it could be a fragment, it does not matter. But it must be on topic and agree with the ideas presented before the colon. So what I can't do is say, oh, I love tacos, colon, Walmart is a great store. You can't really do that because they're completely unrelated. So you just want to make sure that it's a full sentence before the colon, and whatever comes after doesn't matter. Just make sure it's on topic. Let's practice. Take a look at the answer choices. We're going to see punctuation changing. So once again, a period, a semicolon, a no punctuation, and then a colon. We want to look at the clauses before and after the punctuation and determine are they independent clauses or dependent clauses and choose the appropriate punctuation. Let's go ahead and do that. Looking at before the punctuation, obviously plant's going to be included. A group of ecologists led by Axel Mithofer at the Max Planck Institute of Chemical Ecology in Germany examined the defensive responses of 2 varieties of the sweet potato plant. Now, that was a mouthful. That's a full sentence, cut and dry. So we know a full sentence is coming first. Next, we have TN57, which is known for insect resistance, and TN66, which is much more susceptible to pests. Cool. So does that make sense by itself? No, because we're like, what is TN57? What is TN66? This can't stand on its own, so now I know it goes independent clause to a fragment, to a dependent clause. And I have to choose the appropriate punctuation. So now I know I can't use A and I can't use B because periods and semicolons separate 2 full sentences. In addition, periods and semicolons do the same thing. So if you see both in the answer choices, they're both wrong. Anywho's, we're going to move to C and D. Now, does this need a pause there? Would it make sense if I read straight through sweet potato plant TN57? No, you need a pause, right? In addition, what's happening is we have a full sentence before and we have a list after. If we have a list, then we definitely need to use a colon. Therefore, D is going to be the correct answer for this question because TN57 and TN66 are a list representing the 2 varieties of the sweet potato plant. Let's move on to one of the hardest grammar concepts on the test. It's clause transition clause questions. You can identify these because look at the answer choices to the right, it has a noun and then a transition, a disagreeing transition. That is the telltale you are answering these types of questions. And that's really important to watch out for these. So here's how you solve. One, you would just want to treat it like a normal clause question. That's why I call them clause, transition, clause. So you want to determine, is it full sentence, full sentence fragment, independent clause, dependent clause, kind of what's going on here. But if either of them end up being a dependent clause, you actually know to choose answer choice C in this case, where it goes clause, comma, transition, comma, clause. And that is because we know a semicolon cannot separate a full sentence from a fragment or an independent clause and dependent clause. So I know it can't be B or D. And whenever dealing with transitions, they need to be surrounded by punctuation. In this case, A is not surrounding however with punctuation. So if you ever see A, you know it'll never be correct. But if neither of them is a dependent clause, you got to move on to step 2. Step 2 is you have to ask yourself, do these clauses before and after the transition, do they agree with each other or do they disagree with each other? So if they disagree with each other, you know to choose the clause, semicolon, transition clause. In that case, that would be answer choice D. And that's because the transition, whatever clause has the transition, that tells the reader that it disagrees with the clause before it, because it's a disagreeing transition. However is a disagreeing transition, so whichever clause has it disagrees with the one directly before it. But if they agree, then we know that neither of the clauses before and after the however disagree with each other, so it must go with the first one. This is going to be a lot clearer with this example. So once again, always look at the answer choices first. If you see a noun and then a disagreeing transition, so in this case, single-handedly and however, we know to determine is either clause a dependent clause, then that'll tell me it would probably be choice C. But if neither, I need to ask myself, do they disagree or conflict? So let's go ahead and do that. First, let's determine independent clause, or independent clause, dependent clause. Let's check it out. So I'm looking at the blank here, and I can see that single-handedly is going to go with the first clause because it's before the transition. So let me read that. Okinaka doesn't make such decisions single-handedly. That makes sense when read by itself. That's going to be a full sentence. Next, we're going to have the second clause. So all historical designations must be approved by a group of 9 other experts from the fields of architecture, archaeology, history, and Hawaiian culture. That's a full sentence too, right? That's a pretty long sentence. So since it's 2 full sentences, I know I need to use a semicolon because a semicolon separates 2 full sentences. In this case, I know the correct answer will not be C, and I absolutely know it's not going to be D. It will never be D because transitions need to be surrounded by punctuation. With that, now I have to ask myself, do these disagree with each other? So here's what I mean. So he doesn't make decisions single-handedly, right? That's the first idea. The second idea is that all designations must be approved by a group of 9 other experts. That agrees with the idea. He doesn't make them by himself. He doesn't make any decisions by himself because he has to talk to 9 other experts to make them. These ideas agree with each other because they're on topic. They definitely don't conflict. In fact, the second idea improves and makes the first idea stronger. So I know these agree with each other. So that's why it can never be B, because B signifies if I put the however with the second clause, it must mean that second clause disagrees with the one before it, and that is not the case. So A must be the correct answer for this question. Moving on. Ooh, now we're getting into verbs. So fix verb agreement fast with the it-they test. This is one of the coolest tests possible. Step 1, you want to put it and they in front of the answer choices. That's because step 2 will be, you want to determine if the answer choice is singular or plural. So by putting it and they in front of them, it will sound correct with singular verbs, like it is, it has, it sounds. They sounds correct with plural verbs, like they are, they have, they sound. So if I have verbs in the answer choices, and I put it and they in front of them, I can tell very clearly if they're singular or plural, because you want to choose the answer that's different from the rest. And so, yes, you do not read the passage for these questions. You can solve them really, really fast. Let me show you. Look at the answer choices first for all grammar questions. If you see verb number changing, number is just like singular or verb or plural verbs, do the it, they test. You want to put it and they in front of each answer choice and choose the one that's different from the rest. Let me show you guys. So let me get my pen out because I got to write this stuff down. So in this case, we're going to take a look at A. We're going to want to put it in front of it, right? So it is increasing. That sounds bright. What if I did they is increasing? That doesn't sound right at all. So I know this is singular. What about B? It increase, or they increase? That sounds a lot better. This is plural. What about it increases, right? Pretty good. What about they increases? Doesn't make too much sense. So I know this is singular as well. Looking at D, it has increased. Sounds pretty good. Versus they has increased. Doesn't make any sense, so this is singular. Therefore, since 3 are singular, 1 is plural, I know B is the correct answer for this question, and I did not have to read the passage. Moving on, let's solve tough tense questions in 3 steps. Step 1 is you want to find time anchors and other verbs in the passage. Like, time anchors are just words that signify when the events took place. So in this case, it would be words like before, after, today, yesterday, etc. Step 2 is you want to determine the tense. So there's really 3 types of tense: past, present, and future. Step 3 is you just want to choose the answer choice that is consistent with the tense of the passage. Let's practice. Always look at the answer choices first. If you see verb tense changing, so in this case we see had survived, survived, would survive, survives, that goes past to the future tense, to the present tense, it's all moving around, so this is testing tense. What you want to do is find the tense of the passage and then choose the answer that matches. Let's try it out. Like other amphibians, the wood frog is, so I see other verbs in the passage kind of tell me, hey, this might be present tense, I see is here. The wood frog is unable to generate, another verb, its own heat. So during, okay, so current, during periods of sub-freezing temperatures, it blank by producing large amounts of glucose, a sugar that helps prevent damaging ice from forming inside of itself. So there is overwhelming amount of evidence that all the verbs are present tense, so it is very likely the correct answer is present tense. So let's walk through it. A, it had survived. This is past, not digging it. Survived, past again, no bueno. Actually, I gotta write it out because P can stand for present. Would survive is future, and D, survives, is the only present tense. So therefore, D must be the correct answer, and it matches all the other verbs in the passage. So I know it's gonna be D, and that's gonna be the correct question. Moving on, let's pick the right verb form fast, talking about to and ing verbs. So to and ing verbs are the third type of verb question that pop up on the SAT. You had subject-verb agreement, tense, and now to and ing. The first step for solving these is crossing out all unnecessary information in the passage. What this means is it's everything from extremely long names to extra adjectives or descriptions, extra sentences, unnecessary fluff. You really just want to get to the bare bones of the passage. The next step is to read each answer choice into the blank and choose the one that sounds the best. These are super complex topics like non-finite and finite verbs. No bueno. You really just want to YOLO these and read it and choose the one that works the best. It's really, really accurate. Let's practice. So you always want to look at the answer choices. If you see to and ing verbs, so in this case, to have suspended, suspending, to suspend, it's telling me it's a to and ing. I see both. You want to get rid of the fluff and then read each answer choice in the blank and solve it. Let's go. Okay, so I feel like there should be a period here. That looks like a typo, but in the late 1960s, inspired and cited, African-American abstract painter Sam Gillen began to create his iconic drape paintings. So I can see that there's an extra sentence at the top, so you just want to get rid of it. You want to ignore that because you want to focus on what really matters, and that's going to be the sentence with the blank. He applied bold, saturated hues to large canvases and blanked them from ceilings or walls, comma, causing the drooping fabric to cascade into dramatic loops and curves. So if there is a comma and then a part of a sentence that ends with a period, that means it's unessential information, and you can actually get rid of that too. So really the real sentence is, he applied bold, saturated hues to large canvases and blinked them from ceilings or walls. And if I really wanted to be finicky, I could get rid of these extra adjectives like bold, saturated, like he applied hues to canvases and blinked them from ceilings. I can also get rid of or walls. Really, this is the bare bones of the sentence. And now I'm going to read in each answer choice and choose the one that sounds the best. So, he applied hues to canvases and to have suspended them from ceilings. A little choppy, right? No, A is not going to be right. He applied hues to canvases and suspending them from ceilings. Suspending? Nah, too choppy. He applied hues to canvases and to suspend them from ceilings. To suspend? Yeah, I expect more. Nope. He applied hues to canvases and suspended them from ceilings. Period. That makes by far the most sense. That one sounds completely correct. So D is going to be the correct answer for this question. Moving on, let's talk about that extra information I was referencing earlier. So let's never miss extra info questions again. 3 rules. Might be how to answer my phone. So never mix extra info questions again, 3 rules. So the first rule is you got to understand what unnecessary information is. Put basically, it's information that when removed from a sentence, it does not change the sentence's meaning. What you want to do is when you realize it's unnecessary is you want to surround it with punctuation. So it could be 2 dashes, 2 commas, or 2 parentheses. That's unnecessary info. Rule 2 is you have the flip-flop. You have necessary information. This is information needed for a sentence to function. If it is removed, the sentence's meaning changes. It has no punctuation around it. So what you want to do is when you realize this is being tested, you want to read the passage without the information. If the meaning changes, it's necessary and you shouldn't put punctuation. But if the meaning doesn't change, it's unnecessary and put punctuation around it. That's how you tell. So let's practice. We want to look at the answer choices first. And whenever you see commas and dashes moving around between the answer choices, it's going to be testing unnecessary information. So you want to read that information, read the passage without that information. So in this case, we can see like commas moving around, 2 dashes, 2 commas here, maybe a colon thrown here, and then 2 dashes here as well. So it's surrounding different parts of the answer choice. And then you want to determine necessary, unnecessary, and choose the matching punctuation. So my tip for you guys is when you realize this, you want to start outside it in. And so I would probably start with something like D or C, because I can see that it's surrounded by the most punctuation. B only really has these like really tight dashes, and that just looks wrong to me. And then A doesn't really surround it with punctuation. There's kind of like a comma there and then nothing at the end. The commas in between are kind of a list, so you can ignore those. But let's give it a shot. Eli Eisenberg, a genetics expert at Tel Aviv University in Israel. Oh, perfect. Look at this. That's unnecessary info right there. I can actually ignore all of this. It's not part of it. So Eli Eisenberg recently discovered that cephalopods, because it's before the punctuation, have a special genetic ability called RNA editing that confers evolutionary advantages. So cephalopods have a special genetic ability. That reads perfectly. So let me read it with the information to get a good gist. Eli recently discovered that cephalopods, ocean dwellers that include the squid, the octopus, and the cuttlefish, have a special genetic ability. So I'm going to say that ocean dwellers that include the squid, octopus, and cuttlefish is unnecessary information. This doesn't really contribute to the point that they're trying to tell me cephalopods have a special genetic ability. That is the point of the sentence. They are just giving me a list of what cephalopods are to help the reader understand what's going on, but it's not necessary. So if taken out, the sentence functions the same. So I know it's not going to be A because A doesn't surround this part with punctuation. I know it's not B because it only surrounds ocean dwellers with punctuation. So it has to be C or D. But what's unusual is both surround the same part with punctuation. Here we have 2 commas, here we have 2 dashes. So in this case, I can see that the difference between C and D is going to be the fact that there's a colon right here. But what I know about colons is that a full sentence must come before the colon. So therefore, ocean dwellers that include, is that a full sentence? Ocean dwellers that include? No. So actually C is wrong because it's using a colon incorrectly. So D must be the correct answer for this question. Oop, ignore that. So now we have modifiers. So we want to fix modifiers fast in 3 steps. So first step for modifier questions is you want to define it and find it. So a modifier is a phrase that describes a subject. It's usually at the beginning of a sentence and it's followed by a comma and then a blank. Step 2 would be identify and try. You want to find and pose the modifier as a what or who question. Then you would want to solve. So the subject of the answer choices will be the logical answer to your what or who question. This will make a lot of sense with this example. You want to look at the answer choices. If you see the same long sentence restated, look at these. Like, that's an insanely long sentence. You want to find the modifier and then make a what or who question. Look at that banner that popped up. What is that? Take that banner off. There we go. Now I can read it. So you want to make the modifier and make it a what or who question, and then find the answer to the question with the subject. So let me show you. By reducing the runoff flowing into sewers, that's going to be your modifier. It's always going to be a describing phrase. So what's reducing the runoff? Comma, blank. So once we've found that, we want to pose that as a what or who question. So what is reducing the runoff flowing into sewers? Who is reducing the runoff flowing into sewers? But now we want to look at the answer choices and find the subject. The subject will likely be in the first 4-ish words of each answer choice. So in this case, the mitigation is the subject of A. Bioswales is the subject of B. The bioswales mitigation is the subject of C. Watch out for apostrophes. And D is both stream flooding and resulting pollution. That's the subject. And so in this case, what's reducing the runoff? Well, it's very likely going to be, well, is mitigation reducing runoff? Not really. Are the bioswales reducing runoff? Yeah, right? Because we can look at the front and say, well, she oversaw the installation of 164 bioswales, which are vegetated channels designed to absorb and divert stormwater. Makes sense that these things would be reducing the runoff flowing into city sewers. C says mitigation again because it's the bioswales mitigation. And then D, both street flooding. So street flooding is diverting the water from flowing into sewers. That doesn't really make sense. So B must be the correct answer for this question. Moving on. How much more we got? This is a lot of SAT stuff, so we actually do have an entire guide containing all of this material if you've been watching and you would just want a PDF teaching all of these lessons, how to answer every single type of question on the grammar section. Feel free to go to our bio. We're going to have a description and you're going to click it, put in your email, and it's going to give you a confirmation, and then it's going to send it directly to you within 60 seconds. So within 60 seconds, you can have my entire lesson guide for all of SAT grammar. It's like 15 pages, but it'll cover everything in SAT grammar. It's the same lessons that I teach my students where we average above a 150-point SAT score increase per student. And so if you want all of my class materials, just feel free to hit that link and you'll get all the grammar ones. And so you can ace and get a perfect SAT writing score. Ah, sweet. Nicely done, Fartson. All right, well, I'm wrapping up. For anyone who's still left, thank you for watching. It's been grand. And if you want all of my SAT lessons, feel free to click the link in my bio. It's going to have all of SAT grammar, all the lessons I teach my current students. And if you're ever looking for SAT tutoring, one-on-one tutoring, group classes, you can also find our website in our bio as well, where you can take a look. We guarantee 100-point SAT score increases for all of our students. So if you're interested in getting 100 points on your SAT, feel free to book a meeting with us, free strategy call where we help you raise your SAT score. Thank you.